a version of Simic hybrids, and I want to create the best assassins and thieves possible. So, in looking for help, his character is the result of multiple experiments that have finally succeeded in giving him extra abilities. Therefore, he is known as the First, and the rest of the Shadow Clade hunts him mercilessly. I ran a game last night where my group ended up fighting a large group of other Simic hybrid bounty hunters. They had orders signed from the administrator, but I'm trying to figure out who the administrator should be. And so the I'm sorry, you finish up or you're continuing. I also would like to tie in a second player character. He has an artificer, and I think I'd like to include a magic item I thought of. I call it chaos cartridges. Basically, think optional wild magic sorcerer bullets. And pelicans, welcome. We're very close to having catbutt because my tortoiseshell calico here wants to play fetch. So we'll see what happens. So there's the prompt and kind of a cry for help, Technatron. Can you swoop in and help inspire Soul Protagonist with coming up with a big bad side boss for this circumstance?
Well, the generic thing to do is if it's a backstory, clearly you can go from any part from childhood to just becoming an adventurer or the need to becoming an adventurer, and you know your backstory. So tying it in with that, a childhood rival. Let's say you come from most people's backstory is usually orphan or something like that. You could have a teacher or a gang member that was essentially uh, very controlling or manipulative to your situation, and you want vengeance on them. Um, but I would generally say, kind of like what we were talking before, talking about what makes it evil, it's usually the act, and then the monster comes behind it. Um, so applying kind of that, giving your backstory, find someone that was doing something evil towards you, and that will create the monster. Uh, and I would say it doesn't really matter if they're a person or necessarily a being. I would say I would generally go with a ghost or something like that. Uh, but a person is really good, or another race, because the fact is, depending on your DM, you can overcome this mid boss, and because you're personally attached to it, they have something to work with later, aka bring it back and attack you in your sleep or whatever it may be. But I would say that's a good way to make a villain of your backstory and just put whatever you want on it, is how I would go about it.
Something that was coming to my mind. You could have someone who acts almost like a rival, who might also be a product of this shadow clade. If you've created a new weapon, you want to stress test it. And what better way to do that than to have a rival or rivals out trying to hunt down. This person has these new sort of genetically inherited powers, and so you have your top regular assassin, and then you have your other successful but maybe unknown. You have your other successful shadow clade that have been developed, and so you send the three out. You send the two genetically altered shadow clades out with the instructions that if you find others, if only one can survive this process, and so it puts some pressure on them. Now, if they don't want to fight, then it just turns into like a run and hide. The other one could actively hunt and actually try and go for the kill. And then, of course, you have the mundane but still very skillful hunter or assassin who is out after both of them. And so we have kind of like a Paul Bunyan versus the chainsaw. Is the new blood gonna win, or is it gonna be the old ways that can still hold out and are strong enough to go into the future? So that could end up being a big bad, or at least it's a product or a result of the environment. I'm trying to tie this also into the things that you're talking about, Technatron.
Mm-hmm.
How could this reinforce this genetic alteration program? How could this make the world come to life if you have a chase, a hunt, if you have the chance for either peace or conflict, make a deal with your hunter, either of them, or just if you want to be savage about it, then you could turn the tables on them.
I would say this is a perfect case for therefore and but.
Oh, yeah, therefore and but with exactly. I don't know if Soul Protagonist was here. Can you give a quick recap of therefore and but for Soul Protagonist to go through that process? Also, Sketchben, it has been a minute since I've seen you, sir. I hope you've been well. Welcome, welcome back.
And thanks so much for Grace.
Yes, Grace of Darkness. Thank you for 6 months. Hey, that means you get a spicier sub badge. You've moved up from the you've moved blah, blah, blah. I can speak, I swear. You go from the yellow kind of a medium queso. Now you have this nice orange blend of like a salsa con queso. And we're approaching the ultimate red spice at 12 months.
But anyways, therefore and but is essentially a tool to tell a story, but this can work with two different factions, the evil and the good. But most people usually end a sentence like the monster was evil and had fire in its breath, and just stopped right there. But if you apply the therefore and but, you can say the monster was evil with fire in its breath, therefore was feared by the people of the town. But the people of the town had something to take on this beast, a new weapon that they had found. But they do not know how to use it. Therefore, they need to seek out an artificer to teach them the ways. But it is going to cost the society more than they can give. Therefore, the monster is still wreaking havoc. So you just keep on playing that and layering it over, putting therefore and but. It's creating a question after a question. And you'll find that stories tend to not have an end, but give you a much more developed and reason for situations and character development even to exist. But that is a little quick storytelling technique.
I hope that that does help you out, Soul Protagonist. And it not only is it good to see you back here, I'm very happy that you wanted to share your adventure with us and also give us the opportunity to help you run a game that is going to be even more fun and involving for yourself and everyone at your table. That's something that personally is a fulfilling. How do I word this? I take great joy out of knowing that I can meet people, and even if I can't help them, that I can try and set them on a path that will help them have a better time in life. and you know, for you to come in and ask a question, Soul, Technatron, for you to take time out of your evening to spend and to be a guest DM, and even in this case, you stepped up um, and you helped out Soul. I think that was solid advice. And then Bubonic and TJ was asking questions, and I mean, there's just so much awesome interaction that this is exactly what you should get out of an RP session, out of your time at a game store. Honestly, this should be life 24/7, where we all get along willingly through voluntary action. There's really no conflict. People ask for help when they need it. That's not always the case as often as it should be done. And yet, here's a fun little microcosm where we're actually reaping the rewards of the benefits of this behavior.
Oh yeah, the environment of the think tank, how niche this is essentially is, and just thinking about that, if we could just go back 20 years and apply this stuff to like new DMs, if I had that, even like 10 years ago, how important that would have been to hear some of this stuff and just to have someone to relay and work through problems with.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, sir. The things that I'm constantly learning, if only I knew it back then, what mistakes could I have avoided? Where would I be today? No, I don't want to live in the past and have that slow me down. But that's another thought experiment or a story to tell. And Soul Protagonist was saying, is it a bad idea to create an evil character using PC stats and class features? And if you want to answer that, Technatron, it's a good question to ask and have answered. And that could also lead into the discussion of things like a challenge rating for a monster or the mechanical concepts to a monster, and not just the fluff and the lore and things like that we've already talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm all for it. You have a completely broken character or a PC in your game, you create a monster that is exactly the same but slightly better for the players to take on. People realize very fast that sometimes that's not the funnest thing to mess with. But also be careful to make it balanced, and that's kind of what I'm going to go in with the CR and making it fit for your party. But I do want to ask a question though. What is everyone's perfect monster? Like, so is there a monster that you revere as like just the most solid top tier monster? And
Excellent
I mean,
question.
I guess mine surprised me because I sat down and I didn't realize it because I never would have thought of it. But my personal one, when I like did some research into this, it's actually the Mimic. It does multiple things. It creates suspense. It creates question. It attacks from a place that you don't expect but always expect it. And essentially makes a metagame / in-game interaction. So I think the fact that a Mimic can do all those things and create situations like that, I think that is my personal favorite for a design.
Nordic Geek says, my favorite thing is to make a challenging villain that requires an alternate strategy than they have to that they become accustomed to. So if you can't, don't give the villain hit points, but the villain can be defeated if 4 beams of light or something fall on him. James says dragons are your go-to favorite. That's a solid choice. Bubonic is getting a little nuanced here. Depends on whether you're talking about high power or low power monsters. Now, do you want to force a universal answer from Bubonic, or do you want him to supplement or to give you two different answers, Technatron?
Uh, I would say it should just be a monster because it's just the design. What do it like technically with the CR, we can adjust any monster. I can make a mimic have more hit points or more attacks, but it's what it brings to the table. It's the question that I personally like. Same with dragons. Dragons, you can give them more attacks. You can make them hit harder. You can do all these things. They're still a dragon, but it's what it applies to the game. So I think just like what monster do you feel is just a solid design in how it goes?
For me, it's humanoids. I have run so many villains, and I guess you could say monsters. I mean, in so much it's like a random encounter, or in many times they're the attackers or the antagonists. Because not just humans, but humanoids, which could also include giants, as I've had giants as a part of my society as their own people. But I can do so much, and I can turn a man into a monster in no time, rather easily. And then of course I can also supplement that with the poor little girl who is begging for mercy on the streets because she has some bullies after her or something. Nordic Geek is talking about kobolds. Den consists of traps, choke points, magic, and even charismatic events. Grace of Darkness. Oh, is going for the Audiug. Ooh, cool
Mm-hmm.
choice. You don't often hear that.
No, that's a very cool monster. I mean, no, these are all good things, but I was going to say this is very good for all of us to understand the essence of what makes these monsters so good and how to essentially bring them into your game. Uh, there's an element. I mean, there could just be the fact that you really like that monster, or it's a situation in the game, like what I was saying with the mimic. There could be the iconic, just clout with dragons, and it's just cool that they're a dragon. Just like it's a katana, they're just cool. Um, uh, Finding these elements of what makes you like them, or uh, what the element in the essence is, will help you greatly in your home brewing or your monster creation, and just how it feels. It Applying those things will get you really far. But this will lead into the next question: is we always put this CR in fifth edition, and we feel that it's, well, a cobalt, I believe, is a 1/4. It could be a 1/8. I don't know. But like, you have these CRs where they all fit. But the question is the CR really relevant to the monster, or is it to the situation? And I would dare say, can you make a CR1 encounter out of like a great red worm? And can you make a CR20 out of a goblin? And the thing is taking these elements that we're talking about, or that we have talked about, uh, like the three Ys and therefore and but, and all those tools we've been setting up over this week. Um, it will really help you bring unique combats and show you how to essentially manipulate situations in storytelling and realism, uh, for your players to create more unique stories with the monsters that we have. For example, the Great Worm. Uh, there could be a sickness. There could be a weapon that the players could get their hands on to take it down. There could be army that is supporting them and they're just part of the crew. Um, there's multiple ways that you can make level 1 characters go take on these iconic monsters. You just have to give them a reason why they can.
Yep.
Um,
You know,
but that
when
also,
you're talking about that, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick.
oh, go ahead.
Some imagery that was coming to my mind. You're talking about having a level 1 character going after a great worm, or at least something similar. That reminds me of the what were the arcade games? They were directed by Don Bluth, the animator. It was like Dragon's Dungeon. Do you know the ones I'm talking about?
I can't recall.
Dragon's Lair, I think. But anyway, it was a series of arcade games. There's also one called Space Ace. That was a sci-fi version. But you had to react to situations, or you would die. You know, in one hit. It wasn't like a
Yes.
life bar or something. And so that could be a fun challenge where you have a party of like CR. I mean, or not CR. A party of level 1, or if you want to go 3, because not all classes come online until 3. You know, a party of X, and they have the MacGuffin. I want to use terms that we've been talking about this week,
Hmm.
but they have to take down the CR-17, adult dragon. And the entire challenge is you got to get to him. So how are you going to do it? Because you can't necessarily hack and slash your way there, because everything will just insta give you. But you have to use your wits. You have to, you have to do this, and so you're a party of 4 level 3 characters might be able to take down the CR-17 dragon, but they got to get there, and that's part of the challenge as well.
Oh yeah. Um, and the thing is, and as soon as you said about the game and explained, yes, I remember it, and it was brutal. uh, but yeah, a thing is, but when we do this, we need to be very vigilant as DMs, because if you put something in the world like a great red worm, we also have to understand how we can control the outcome, because immediately your players are going to be like, well, we just killed this dragon, we get 20,000 experience. You can just give it to them, but to make it CR appropriate, and you're making it a CR1, it should have the appropriate impact. So if you explain appropriately, you get the situation to work out, and explain essentially why they can't keep the dragon, or essentially why it didn't give uh essentially the whole XP. It could have not been a dragon and illusion, or all those types of things. But if you give a very descriptive reason why it stays at CR1, um, you're actually going to create a much better story, and also something very captivating that will give a little bit more of a unique and epic feel. James was already going at it with a kobold and a mech suit. You're already thinking something more epic than, well, what's your everyday demon that you're going into? Okay, we've seen
Yes.
that, but we haven't seen a goblin like that's this high. Like, what is this goblin running around with a vorpal sword for, and throwing soldiers glue at people and getting them stuck to everything? You're immediately giving much more story. You're creating a situation that players will enjoy because it's more unique, and you have to actually give yourself a reason for it, which will make you as a DM grow a little bit more too, because you have to kind of flex those creative muscles and make the situation work out. And I was just gonna say, I can't put more of an emphasis when you're doing these things. than environment. Environment can entirely make a situation easy or extremely hard. You put players underwater, they're going to treat the situation entirely different than they would on land. They're experiencing exhaustion from the heat. All these different elements are going to give more texture to your situation and more of a reason why it more difficult or easier. And you start playing with those also with your combination of your monsters or your situations. You'll start to understand that they very much get more difficult or they're a little bit more customizable, and you can bring that challenge really to your players.
You could have that same CR-17 adult dragon that's been pinned in a cave in and is half starved and sort of just not long for this world if not for its otherwise prodigious strength or constitution. And the party of level 2 adventurers comes across this dragon that, you know, as described or presented, may very well be every inch of CR-17, but because of that environment or because of the circumstances, might not be able to conjure its breath weapon, may barely even be able to speak, or while otherwise it would be, you know, duplicitous and deceitful, it's dying and it actually needs help. And this is the one time to honestly deal with a dragon. Pardon. You know, could a dying dragon still just obliterate a level 2 or whatever party? Probably. But the circumstances are right that it doesn't have to be the case. Also, Bubonic once said that your favorite overall monster is a troll, and that is a solid choice. You can do a lot of stuff with a troll, and they definitely have their own notable presence or their kind of aesthetic to them.
Definitely. But yeah, I would say creating, just asking ourselves these questions with these monsters, they're telling tales just by themselves, from us making evil monsters to changing the CR and asking our questions, what would make this work? We're actually creating environments around them. We're giving a reason why this is happening, and we haven't even gone into it and changed the hit points. Well, technically, a dragon would have, they're generally in the 300 plus range. But the thing is if they're already wounded and, like you said, they're in a cave in or something, they might only have one hit point left, and they're asking for you to take it. That creates an entirely different situation. Um, And not to mention, you can, because these things are intelligent and you can do things like speak Draconic and stuff like that, have situations where they essentially turn into an NPC just for a moment. And I bet a lot of people want to know some knowledge that's going on in a dragon's mind just on their
If I can
deathbed.
bring that back around to our very first conversation then this week, could we be perhaps creating backstory by contemplating things one at a time to how we get a severed dragon's head in a cart?
Yeah,
Maybe things that we hadn't considered before, but now that we've kind of taken the time to scratch our noggins and to go through this thoughtful process, we have created an entire tapestry of information and lore and other monsters and NPCs. And you know, one of the questions that we were asking ourselves when we went back to that picture, and I'll bring it up for anyone who hasn't gotten to see it yet. Hang on, I got to scroll down. Was what happened to the party that had the head before? Because our natural reaction is to say that's at least an adult red dragon. Man, whoever brought that thing down must be tough. and with what you're talking about and what you're inspiring people to think about and challenge them to try, it may very well seem like it was a very tough encounter, but for all we know, if we don't have the body, was the body crushed and this was a trophy off of an already dead dragon or a freshly dead, or they actually just put it down because there we go. Because the level 1 adventurer got that natural 20 that you need to do anything to the height of this thing. And so you have a bunch of level 1 people coming down the wagon trail, and those same, goblins or kobolds or bandits in the woods pop out. That's a real threat to a level 1 party, and they could have just, said, sucks to that, we're going to run away. And that's what happened to the party, because they were level 1 adventurers that harvested this dragon head.
And the thing is if you think about this, a hero is fun, but a false hero is even funner. So they go into town, they're considered heroes or whatever it be, but that also means someone who really did the work knows who they are. That right there creates a bit of a contrast and a bit of a cat and mouse situation.
Can you talk a little bit about challenge rating, and what are some general considerations, or if we do want to not just modulate the environment, or through unique story circumstances, which I'm absolutely for. However, this is a conversation that is blending fluff and crunch alike. Is there some things that you can throw out there to consider? I do have some books open to go along if you want to reference them, or if there is a particular thought or worksheet, or do you abide by some, these are some pretty solid standards for different CRs that you've noticed as kind of a quick and dirty thing. Can you take us through challenge ratings?
Yes. One thing to always kind of understand is that the CR system is built off of a party of 4. So whenever you're applying the CR, understand that even if you have let's say a party of 8, and they're all level 4, it's still going to be a CR4 monster or whatever they're supposed to go up against, but you would have 2 of them. Throwing that up and saying, well, since there's 8 of them, we can go up to 12 or whatever it has. That is true, but if you do that, that's going to change essentially the XP put out, other things like that, and it kind of off-puts the system. So, also with that, it actually creates much more unique environments because you can build up to CRs. Having 10 kobolds with a CR4 monster is going to make a much different battle and a more unique battle than just throwing up 2 CR4 monsters. So getting combinations, getting monsters that work off of each other, is really the good tool to use when putting these things together, and also understanding the XP that they're going to essentially give out. And also, from what we were talking about before, there's lists and forms. If you're a CR, I believe it doesn't matter which one, but it gives how much XP each of them should have, and I believe there's a list how much hit points they should have. And let's say we were dumbing down a dragon and we're they're extremely wounded, they only have 1 hit point. It's very important that you bring that whole CR to that situation and see the appropriate XP that you should be giving out. Because that still gives a reward, but it also, like I said, you don't have to worry about completely offsetting your game by all of a sudden one combat with someone taking the last hit point from a dragon and they're all magically level 10. So understand when you're applying those things, definitely reference these lists and adjust your CR appropriately, and you'll find that you'll have a much more evenly paced game.
James, I can agree to that because the CR system is not as tight and works very well mathematically as the 4th edition system did. 4th edition was amazing for monster building and for kind of like leveling out conflicts and just kind of measuring things out in a more mechanical sense. Challenge ratings are definitely a guideline. They are considerations, and there's a lot of kind of overlap between the two. You know, think of it, if you've ever seen a maybe I can even pull one up. If you've ever seen a graph of when a car changes gears.
Are you asking me, or?
Well, I mean, to you or for the chat out there, where we have, if you take a look at the whenever you shift gears, how gear 1 can get into gear 2 power, but gear 2 starts a little bit back in 1, but then goes into solid 2 and then bleeds a little bit into 3rd, and then you can get some of the power of 3rd and 2nd, but then really you need to go into 3rd. That will then get you into 4th, and so on and so forth. And I'm not finding a good one quickly here, but if you get the concept, challenge rating can be a lot like that as well. It is not an exact science. I mean, we're seeing some cool numbers in the chart that's in the Dungeon Master's Guide here. But there are things that it just does not take into consideration, such as environment, or I mean, there's some other things that we might consider kind of fluff. Languages it could speak, or if it has 2 resistances, it's not going to affect the defensive challenge rating. As soon as it gets 3 resistances, it does. But you know what? The 2 resistances that one has may very well be 2 of the major damage outputs that the party has. So you do have to take the context of the monster and the party and the environment into consideration.
Well, and I would actually say this is kind of interesting for, I think too many people rely on monsters being the CR, but not the combat being the CR. So it's the situation that you should be looking at is the CR, not necessarily the monster. Because, I mean, it's kind of like, well, it's in the monster stat block and everything like that, that this is a CR this. But it's actually more appropriate to make the CR for the room or for the session, but applying it to the system that they give in 5e, you can actually, as long as you're kind of sticking to the character's level and looking at the output, mixing in little things, the math works out pretty consistently. And if you are wanting to take a step back and worry about the action economy or the resistances and stuff like that, you can definitely adjust for that, because yes, a single grung, for example, is not the worst thing to deal with, but as soon as you get into the orange grung where they can throw out a shout and stun people, it becomes a whole different animal.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Technatron. You were talking about it was a monster that you really liked, and it was some kind of a grub swarm that in your opinion really takes people by surprise in how potent they are for their challenge rating.
Oh yeah,
They're like mind grubs or something like that.
yeah. It It was some sort of grub swarm. And I can try to find it. But yeah, essentially they're slow. They're nothing like too over the top, but they have a effect where they burrow into you. You have one turn to burn them out, and you have to burn them out. And if you don't, they go to your heart and kill you. They are one of those. There's very few situations in D&D where you're insta dead, and that is one of them. I think it's called a rot. Uh, rock grub swarm. And it was in Volo's guide.
That does sound very familiar, the rot grub. And as I was typing out to Pelican here, if you have the party that meets the CR, it is not necessarily going to be a deadly fight. It's just going to be a fair fight. That could bleed back a little bit into 4th edition, thinking of, are there going to be 3 fights a day, or what's the pacing to things? And if I can point something out real quick, Technatron, if we took a concept like one of your art pieces, if you say, well, I want to create I want to create this flying tick or this flying spider, and my party's level 8 or something, or I want to create a CR8. You could do that in a couple ways. One, you could just take the stat blocks that are offered in this chart that you all can see up here. This is page 274 of the DMG. Just give it a +3 proficiency bonus, AC of 16 from whatever. Doesn't matter. Hit points, there's a range. Give it however many hit points you want. +7 to attack, and it deals 51 to 56 damage per round. Fire, sure. Cold, yeah. Bludgeoning, magical piercing, whatever you want. As long as the output is 51 to 56 damage per round, and to save against its effects is a 16, this is a CR8 creature. And yet we can apply the same stat line of this flying spider of Technatrons and create a CR 1/4 creature by applying that stat line. And then you use your imagination putty to fill in the gaps, to talk about the attacks that, the 4 to 5 damage per round is from its bite. Or it doesn't bite, it has a big scary mouth, but it actually can't bite or something. And so it's actually just psychic damage, because that's how it actually eats. So for the most part, the damage and whatnot doesn't matter really the source. We're just looking at the output. And then there's one more way to calculate CR. And are you good if I go over that real quick, Technatron?
Oh,
Just because I have the manual up on the screen, and I want people to look at it in case they haven't before.
This is a really good tool for making homebrew stuff. So
yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So your final challenge rating is the average of your defensive challenge rating and offensive challenge rating. So you calculate that by finding the numbers, right? Read down the hit points column of the monster statistics until you find your monster's hit points. And so this is if you want a piecemeal, or you say, man, I really want a big hit point pool monster. And so, I don't know, let's roll something random. Let's give we want a beefy monster, or whatever. This flying spider can actually take some hits. Let's give the flying spider 200 hit points. So that is going to indicate that this is a defensive CR9. But we made it kind of a hit point pool, but maybe its armor class is actually, it's a little weaker, a little lower. And so we want to give it an AC of 14. Well, 14 is going to indicate that is a challenge rating, a defensive challenge rating of 4. Okay? And so now we've looked at are we've looked at the table, we've cross-referenced armor class and hit points. Now we take a look at the offensive challenge rating. Read down the damage per round column, as well as the attack bonus, and these are the two big things to look at. And so now we want to make maybe kind of maybe a glass cannon. It has a bunch of hit points, but it's super easy to hit. But we want this thing to hit kind of hard, and so whatever, we're the DM, maybe we know the average hit points of our party members or something, and we say, you know what, we definitely are going to be putting out about we're going to be putting out about 50 damage per round through multi-attacks, whatever, laser beam eyes. The source of the damage doesn't really matter. If it's a spellcaster, just pretend like you're casting every high-level spell consecutively, because this is a good statistic, by the way, everyone. Most combats are over in about 3 or 4 rounds. I mean, maybe a boss fight goes to the legendary minute combat of 10 rounds or higher. But if you're looking at the potential for consistent output, this is what we're measuring. And so if we have 50 damage per round, then that is going to be an offensive rating of 7. And then we look at our 2 hit, and we're pretty accurate here. So we're gonna give them, we're gonna give a +7. +7 to hit is an offensive rating of, well, it could be 8, 9, or 10. So, I mean, you could decide if something matches up. I mean, it's technically the +6 is at the 50 DPR, so maybe we only count it as 8 if we give it the +7. If you want to take it to the extreme, again, there's wiggle room here. But let's say that's an offensive challenge rating of 8. So now what we can calculate is our defensive challenge rating for this monster. 9 + 4 is 13, divided by 2, because we're looking at the average, is 6.5. If you want to round up, or if you want to go 6.5, we can do so, because we're actually going to be adding the 2. And then we come down here to the offensive challenge rating, and this is 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So our challenge rating for this flying mind spider, that was initially this concept, this artistic concept that was kind of drawn up on Technatron's whim, we had 6.5 to 7.5, and so we actually get 14 divided by 2, and as long as we're abiding to these 4 general constraints, the monster is a CR7 monster on average.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you brought up a lot of interesting stuff. There are lair actions, there's environmental concerns. In fact, the fact it can fly can also alter the CR a little bit here. The creating
Also,
a monster section is good for that, because if you take a look on page 280, this is going into a lot of things that could modify something. So if we take a look at flight, Fey ancestry doesn't affect CR.
well, I was
Flyby as
also
an
going to
attack.
say, be very aware of action economy as well.
Oh, in terms of which actions it'll take in what order?
Know how many attacks it could have. So essentially, like if you have 5 goblins versus 1 monster that has 1 attack that just hits hard, that can very much change your situation you're in, especially at lower levels.
I'm not sure why flying. I thought flying was a part of something here, unless they're calling it something different. But here, I'll use regeneration. This would be a good thing to consider. So if you give regeneration to your monster, and they're using the troll as an example, increase the monster's effective hit points by 3 times the number of hit points the monster regenerates each round. So if we arbitrarily assign it to 10 hit points, our monster's effective hit points are going to go to 230, which means that we need to go back and take a look that now a monster with, on average, 230 hit points is... I scrolled too far. I dug too deep. 230 hit points is now a defensive challenge rating 11, which would then give us a 15 if we don't adjust AC, and therefore a 15 divided by 2 is going to be 7.5. And then 7.5 would equal a CR 7.5 when combined with the 7.5 offense. And if you want to round up, by simply adding regeneration and changing nothing else about the monster, we have an 8-ish. Maybe we round up if we don't find anything about some other little abilities that we're using to round or something. But by simply adding regeneration at 10 hit points per round, that increases from a 7 to an 8 challenge rating.
Yeah, definitely.
So sorry, I went on a bit of not a rant, but I was going on about this because I want people to feel empowered about this knowledge. And also, if you bring up a stat block of a dragon, pardon me, you know, here's an adult black dragon that we have in the monster manual. Take this info, realize it's a CR 14, and I would challenge you all out there. Change nothing else, change absolutely nothing else about the dragon, and make this dragon the one that's pinned underneath, make it pinned underneath a boulder or something at effectively 1 hit point, and see how that one change, by giving it 1 hit point, 10 hit points, will affect the challenge rating if you change nothing else about the monster in comparison to what, you know, is being offered.
Oh, definitely. And that's also really important. It's skill to have. So you not only understand how to make a monster, you know how to deconstruct a monster as well.
Now, I have to ask Technatron, because I confess at certain times I'm a bit of a lazy DM. And if I just want to, if I realize I have a level 4 party and I want to, you know, maybe rough them up a little bit, but I don't want to look at all the different monsters through all the different books or something. Can you help me be a lazy DM? Is there a resource that I can tap into for that?
Yes. What you're suggesting is Kobold Fight Club.
Yeah, those kobolds are at it again.
Yep. And are known as KFC. And yes, it is a fantastic resource when creating combats and looking through systems of what's available. And yeah, it does pretty much all the work for you. There are several resources out there, but this one is probably the most straightforward. And this still gives you a little bit more customization because you get a bit pick and choose your monster. But there's also resources if you're being extremely lazy. There's an entire dungeon generators with the monsters from like Donjon.
Yep, on Donjon. Fantastic website. Can you? I will be your arms on display. Can you take me through if I want to create some kind of an encounter for whatever X level party of whatever? Can I guide me? I will be your clicky fingers so people can see how this website works, because I think for some it could look a little daunting. There's a lot of boxes, a lot of things here. Can you help me show them how this site works?
Yeah, just go to the top left, choose how many players you have and what level they're at. That would be the first step, and we can go with, we were talking about a party of 8 and they were level 4. so we can kind of see how this applies.
Okay, so we have 8 players and they're at level 4. Now what?
Now, just go over to the right, and you can choose what CR rating you would like. So if you want to get a round lower or higher for the monsters, or if you just don't care, keep it blank. And if you're going extra easy, just click the random button. Like, I believe that's what it is.
So it looks like it's suggesting that a medium level encounter for 8 players of level 4 would be 1 Gnoll Pack Lord, 1 Ogre, and 1 Orog Orc.
And that's like just right there. It is as simple as that. But I would say if you go one step further, we can apply where we know that 2 CR4s, let's say for the group, and we want to just do like essentially another step. We can go in and we can set the minimum and maximum at 4 and just choose 2 monsters. And that would do essentially the same thing as the random generator.
I hope you all out there were able to see what was changing on the screen here. Hello, Lasaria. Good morning to you, and welcome. And you know what? You were talking about the environment, Technatron. We can limit it to, yeah, this is going to take place in a mountain. We can go to any environment, in which case you all saw that our choices exploded. Is this taking place in a dungeon? Is it taking place in a swamp? And of course, I mean, your ghosts might not live in a swamp for some reason. It's a sacred swamp, and so it'll recommend ghost because in the monster manual that is an environment where you'll be more likely to encounter them. But the ways that you can manipulate this, and as a dungeon master, you have to be aware. You know, where would this fight take place? What are the conditions? Everything Technatron was talking about, you can incorporate into the Kobold Fight Club or your own machinations. And I'll tell you something fun to do, Technatron, and you might have done this too, is you could rely on a tool like this that will give you an output of a Gnoll Pack Lord, an Ogre, and an Orog. And instead of an Ogre, an Orc, and a Gnoll, you just have 3 humans that are just beefy and they're built for, you know, this environment. And so now we come back to what you're talking about reskinning monsters.
Exactly. And also, James brings up a point where, yeah, necessarily these resources aren't going to line up every time or necessarily do the right thing for your game. But that's where you as a DM or understanding of the monsters to adjust it appropriately. Sometimes things can be a little off, like we were talking about CR ratings of like other monsters that are a little bit stronger for their CR, or you know that it would be a deadly encounter, even though it's labeled as not something too bad. I think it's the giant constrictor snake is probably one of the more evil things for low levelers.
Yep, constrictors. I think killed off 2 or 3 characters in my Tomb of Annihilation game.
And yeah, so the thing is it's always good to have your like this is a good resource to understand and how to get a calculation, but also be very aware of what you're putting into your game, because I think I said this before, if you put it in your game, expect it to happen. And I think I was saying that with like the note inside the dragon's mouth. Not that they need to find it, but the fact that it's there is going to bring that extra uh, touch to your game, and sometimes bringing that monster that's just hitting a little harder, or that is a little bit more powerful than your group, might sting a little bit harder. And I would even say, with the last thing I want to talk about, the 3 ways of fighting a monster, and I would even say the 3 ways that a monster fights. Um, be very aware of all that. Like for players, they can go up and just smash it, kill it. But then there's also a way to take on a monster by essentially consoling it, or befriending it almost. And then there's also the more pacifistic approach, like push it away, kind of back to the Tarrasque of old. You couldn't really kill it, so you would just send it to another dimension. Um, those are the 3 primary ways that players will interact with your monsters, but also understanding that your monsters can attack players in multiple different ways, where they're stronger against casters, or maybe they can only be attacked by range. Things of that element that are like, as soon as you start working with it and homebrewing it and understanding design of monsters, is going to give you a much stronger tactical advantage uh, to games. So, for instance, goblins might be very good at range because of their short bows. And if you put them at, like, in an environment where they're in a cave system that's only 3 feet tall, they can walk freely, but they have to now duck, and they're in, uh, I guess,
They're squeezed.
dangerous terrain.
The squeezing condition.
Yeah. The thing is that immediately changes everything. Just like, for instance, a dragon flying and using its breath weapon is far more devastating than sitting in front of the group and just shooting it. Um, so the thing is understanding there are multiple ways. There are monsters that specifically go after healers, or after tanks and stuff like that. And getting that kind of smorgasbord of monster creation and mixing it up every now and then is actually going to make your players really shine. Because if you can make a druid look really good in one game, you've now essentially sent the spotlight to them in a few different ways in combat. And let's say you pair that up with narrative, you're really going to get that person really involved. And then the next week, who knows, wizards could be very powerful, and seeking out old magic and playing up like arcane and other mysticisms, and doing that, but still letting the other player support. You're actually creating a very unique setting, and also monsters that give a not so static chop chop, send it through, give me my XP. Um, and also becomes much better for DMs, because you don't get in, okay, here's the monster, you're going to kill it, so I might as well not get attached to it.
Yeah, if the passion, because we've used passion as a descriptor, right? It energizes yourself, it energizes your players. If you don't have passion for the combat or for the encounter, you don't have to care about every goblin you're throwing at your PCs, because it may end up the way that you suspect. But it doesn't mean that you still can't, put a little bit of banter, put a little bit of, good description into it. Energize it, and use the environment to make it more than just, all right, roll initiative, roll your 20s, like you're just getting through something. Like, why are we even here? We're just random number generators then.
Oh, definitely.
Well, sir, do you have anything else you want to throw out? Some advice or anything else you want to say to our very awesome, lovely, and chatty audience tonight?
Uh, I would just say, keep on gaming and play with what's at the table. I mean, I can give my handle if you guys want to check me out at
Yeah,
my
share your
Twitch
info.
streams and see some of my art posting, or just a way to get in contact with me. Hit me up here.
And if people have
And
questions, they can message you, correct?
oh, entirely. Um, I'm always open for a discussion, and also on my stream, I talk Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit.
Yeah. Hey, watch him perform. Ask him questions. Technatron's an amazing dude, and we're gonna have him for one more night tomorrow, or I guess technically today, at least in my time zone. And what is our final workshop for the week gonna be, Technatron?
I think nothing would be sweeter than making the cake. So let's take everything that we've got. We got the small storyline. We understand how to make the NPCs. We're going over like the monsters and stuff like that. I would say it would be entirely appropriate to make a custom homebrew villain, appropriate settings and environments for the monsters, and make a compelling situation and kind of put it all together.
Very well. So we're gonna be making the one shot about the dragon head, the wagon, the inter-kingdom conflict, and we're gonna tie everything up. I like that expression. Nothing sweeter than making the cake. So we'll definitely do that. Then, I'll wrap things up tonight by saying, we were talking about Tarrasques, and you know who's fighting a Tarrasque right now? The folks over at D&D Time. What do y'all say we give them a raid and see just what happens when you fight a Tarrasque, especially in the lands of D&D Time, because it's a special place. All right, well, eating the cake too. Yeah, that's very sweet.
Mm, the
So,
little red hen.
Technatron, thank you again, brother, for showing up tonight. It's
Thanks
amazing
for
having
having
you
me.
here. For everyone out in chat, whether you're new, you're lurking, and haven't spoken up, or if you're an old timer around here, I appreciate it. Now, share, thank you. Emmy, you're very welcome, and I hope it helped out. And now let's have a little fun and find out what happens when you fight a Tarrasque, and just what might have been modulated, if anything, by Jeremy as he's running this epic level monster. So be well, everyone.
Take care.